Hello, good afternoon. Uh, or good evening, or good morning, good night, wherever you happen to be in the world. Welcome to the stream. So, my name is Natalie MacLeese. I am the founder of Aardvark, which is an accessibility testing tool. And I do these live streams every other Wednesday afternoon, my time zone. I am in Los Angeles, so 1 p.m. every other Wednesday on a whole variety of different accessibility topics to help spread knowledge about accessibility, help people learn a little bit more about it. Because we do have a general accessibility crisis on the web. Most websites are not accessible, and there are people who are being excluded from online life and access to information and services. And I want to do my part to help address that shortcoming. So, welcome. I'm glad that you're here if you're joining us. And we're going to dig in today to the topic of accessibility overlays. And I'm going to take just a couple of minutes to talk about those and the different types of them that we have. And we're going to look quickly at a few of the more common ones that you may come across online. But like figuring out first, what are we talking about? Like, what do we mean when we say an accessibility overlay? And there are kind of two general families of these accessibility overlays. So the one that I think is relatively harmless is an overlay that simply adds some additional user preference settings to a website. So makes it easy to zoom in text or flip to a high contrast mode and things like that. And that's all it does, is to provide those additional settings. So I think that type of overlay is relatively harmless and could be helpful for people who may not realize that those kinds of tools are available and might appreciate having them on your website. And I think when people talk about accessibility overlays, that's generally not the type that they're talking about, because there's people don't generally have a problem with that style of accessibility overlay. The other type of accessibility overlay that I think where most of the complaints come from are these overlays that give you one line of JavaScript to embed in the site. And the claim that they make is that they will fix accessibility issues on your website automatically for you so that you don't have to then go back and manually do that. And I like to tell a personal story. I got invited to an event that was put on by one of our local occupational therapy clinics, just bringing together people who were involved in accessibility and disability communities, just for networking purposes. It was just a, Friday night cocktail hour. And there were lawyers, there were therapists, there were all different people, working in this field from all different angles. And as I made my way around the group and chatted with people, and when I mentioned that what I did was help to make websites accessible, every single person that I spoke to at this event, which was not everybody who was there, but it was quite a few people, said, "Oh, I made my own website by putting one of those little widgets on there, right? One of those little overlays." So there's definitely a pretty wide perception that this is the solution, the quote solution to making sure your website is accessible. This is a group of people who work in the fields of accessibility and disability every day, who are very knowledgeable about different types of challenges. And even this group, right, had been was under the impression that this was all that they needed to do. So that's what we're going to dig into today. We're going to actually look at an overlay installed on a website, and we're going to see what kinds of issues does it fix and what kinds of issues doesn't it fix. And we're just taking a very objective point of view. And I want to demo for you just a couple of the most popular accessibility overlays so that you have a good idea of what we're talking about. So the first website I want to let you know about is the one that is up on the screen right now, which is the overlay fact sheet, which is available at the overlayfactsheet.com. I'm sorry, I think I said it's just overlayfactsheet.com. And this website is just a single page. We'll walk you through. We have the table of contents here, like what is an overlay, explaining what it is, the strengths and weaknesses of them, the strengths and weaknesses of automated repair, fitness for achieving compliance, privacy of personal data, in their own words, which is a section of the site where people with different types of disabilities have made known their opinion of these different accessibility overlays, their own personal experiences with them. And then a conclusion, and then signatories to the fact sheet. There are over 1,000 different accessibility professionals who have signed this fact sheet. If you read through it and you agree with it, maybe you would consider signing it as well. And then there's also links out to additional resources. So if you want to do some just general research on overlays for yourself, this website is a good place to get started. So let's take a really quick look at 3 of the most popular accessibility overlay widgets. I'm just going to show their websites, kind of demo the product a little bit for just a second, and we'll look at what some of the claims are being made on the different websites. So first up is Accessibility, and I'm not on the accessibility homepage, like not the homepage of their website, but I'm on the page that's specifically about their overlay, which they call their access widget, right? So it's accessibility.com/access widget. And all of these websites have, where did that just come from? That was very weird. Anyway, all of these have their own widget installed on their website. So we can take a look at what the accessibility widget looks like. So I opened it up here and we can see I can reset the settings. I can get to just a statement. I would presume that to be an accessibility statement. I've got a variety of settings that I can use to personalize my experience. And then even more down here, there's a lot of settings available in this widget. So we can change the cursor, we can add reading guides, we can change all different kinds of, like this whole panel is just about adjusting colors and contrast in different ways. This whole panel here is about adjusting text. So we have all kinds of different adjustments that we can make to the website. But that is, of course, not all that this widget is doing. So let's go ahead and read through. I'm just going to close this chat widget here. Let's just read through the website a little bit. So we have AI-powered web accessibility and compliance solution built to enhance accessibility, comply with legislation, and mitigate your legal risk. And if we scroll down a little bit, we get a social proof section telling us websites that are using this particular widget. And then I think this little section here, how Access Widget powers accessibility, is probably the most helpful section for understanding what they're all about. And so they have this little three-part introduction, I guess, to the widget. And so step 1 is audit. So once Access Widget is installed on your website, it immediately uses AI technology to scan your website and identify accessibility issues. And then we go to step 2. Access Widget automatically remediates accessibility issues found during the audit, enabling keyboard navigation and use with screen readers. And then we finally have step 3, which is monitor, which is after the initial audit, Access Widget continues to scan and remediate your website every 24 hours, helping you maintain your site's accessibility. So those are the general claims that are being made on this website for accessibility. And let's take a quick look at Audio Eye. And again, they put theirs at the lower left, but they have their own widget installed on their site. So we could take a quick look at what that looks like. And I think what's interesting about this one is that the default screen that the widget opens to is actually to report an issue. So if you've come across an accessibility issue on the website, which well, actually it says something else. So I guess any kind of issue, it gives you this little form where you can report that issue. And presumably that would come through to the website owner in some way. We can switch to the other tab here, which is the personalization tools. And we see, like, again, these are very similar. There are less overall options. Like, this is probably the shortest personalization panel of any of the ones that I've looked at. But we see we can adjust the cursor, contrast, color, text, different things about the text, etc. And we also have some keyboard shortcuts that this one is adding as well. And let's just take a look at the page and see what kinds of claims they're making about the widget. And again, this is not the Audio Eye homepage. This is the page for, they have a section in their menu called Solutions, and this is their automated fixes page under Solutions. So that's where we are, which is where they talk about their overlay or widget that's available to be installed. So we have instantly resolved thousands of issues so your users don't miss a beat. And it says our industry-leading digital accessibility platform can automatically fix most common accessibility issues, moving you closer to accessibility and compliance. And we have this section that says you can deliver accessibility at scale, fix issues for every user, and lower your risk of being sued. And then most of the rest of the page is not super informative. We're already at the footer. So there's not a whole lot more information available on this page. And then finally, let's take a quick look at UserWay. Again, they have the widget on their page, so we can take a look. Here we have language, we have different profiles, and if I click on that, if I identify, I guess, as any one of these profiles, it's like a shortcut to getting all the settings I might want. We can change the size of the widget, and then again, we've got all these personalization options available for adjusting color, contrast, the cursor, different things about the text, etc. And let's go ahead and read through this page to see what claims they're making. So it says, start your ADA compliance journey with the accessibility widget, conform to WCAG 2.1 and 2.2, and boost performance along the way. So the performance claim is interesting. It's got nothing to do with accessibility, but I guess every website owner wants their website to be more performant. This section says fixes your code, adapts to your users with a full suite of 100 plus AI-powered accessibility tools, integrations on 20 plus platforms, and support for 50 plus languages. The widget powers the accessible web. Get free live installation support. And then we have a social proof section. And then we have a section where I guess it's explaining how it conforms to these different like general user profiles. And that's kind of the most information that we get. The rest of this is very general information that's not providing any specifics. And that's kind of the extent of the claims being made for the UserWay widget. So I randomly selected one, and we are going to be testing with the UserWay widget today. So I did set up an account with them, and this is the website that we're going to be using. It is online. It is freely available if you want to go give it a try for yourself. It is discovervenus.site, and this version of the website does not have the overlay widget installed. If you go to discovervenus.site /overlay-test, this is the version of the website that does have the widget installed. You can see it down here in the lower right-hand corner of the website. So these two copies of the website are exact copies. This is it's a very simple static HTML site. There's not a whole lot going on here. It's about 8 or 9 different pages, and they're exact copies. And the only difference between the two copies is the one at /overlay-test has the UserWay overlay widget installed. And what we are going to do is we're going to go ahead and do some live tests comparing these two different versions of the website. So this particular website, discovervenus.site, was created by me. It was purposefully created with accessibility issues to be used for testing like automated accessibility scanners and for practice. Like if you want to just practice manual accessibility testing, this is a site that you can come and you can use for that and see what issues you can find. So because I built this site and because I built it purposefully to have accessibility issues, I have a list of known accessibility issues on this site that were put there on purpose. So I have a spreadsheet here that we're going to be using today that has all of my on purpose accessibility issues for the website. And I have them broken down, what principle from WCAG, what the issue is, the success criteria, what page the item appears on. And I do have this spreadsheet sorted by page so that we're not jumping around between pages a lot during the testing. And I have just a little hint for myself about exactly where on the page that's located. Column G has my prediction. So it has a green dot and where it says the word likely. If I think it's likely that the widget would actually fix that issue. If it says red or unlikely, I don't think that the widget is likely to be able to fix that issue, but we'll find out for sure. And if it's yellow, I really didn't know. So we're going to test and figure it out. And then there's just some notes over here about the different tests and things that we'll be trying. And I'll share the Google Sheet too once we've got it all filled in there. And we'll kind of see how it goes and see how many of these issues we're actually able to fix just by installing the widget and what we're not able to fix. Now, the stream is only an hour, right? And doing a full accessibility test on this website would take much, much longer than that. So this will just be a quick look at these specific issues that I know are on the site and whether or not the overlay widget was able to fix them. We'll do as much testing as we can, but obviously this is not a comprehensive or full accessibility test on the site. All right, so let's just dive in and start the testing and we'll see how it goes. We'll see what we can figure out. So the first issue that we have is on the homepage. We have low contrast text in the hero. So if I go back over, this is the original version of the site without the overlay. It's this 25% off text that's in the hero section. It's blue on a background image, and the part of the image that it appears over is kind of a dark purpley color, and there's not sufficient contrast. So that does fail. 1.4.3 does not have a contrast ratio that is high enough. And if we jump over and take a look at the version with the widget installed, it's exactly the same. So it didn't fix contrast issues. Now, that's not to say that it didn't provide users a way to fix those issues for themselves. So let's take a look at what some of our options are in the overlay as far as color and contrast are concerned. So you'll notice first that my options are in a different order than the overlay that was on their website. And that's because you can modify this widget and move things around however you like. Mine is just the default. Like I didn't adjust any settings. I just installed it and that was it. So let's take a look at this contrast plus setting first. And the first option that I have when I click that one time is to invert the colors, which makes the whole website, opposite. So every color on the website is now on the opposite side of the color wheel. So our pink and purple sky became this now yellow and green kind of sky. It looks a little creepy, and, right? It looks like photo negatives, right? That's basically what it is. So it flipped the contrast on everything. And one thing I didn't show, let me go back over to the other website, is that this 25% off text that's in the header is not the only low contrast text that's on the website. If I scroll down, you can see that we've got this very pale yellow for headers, and then the blue that is used as the background of the buttons Now, depending on your eyes, that may like look fine to you, but it actually just barely misses passing the contrast ratio, right? It should be 4.5 to 1, and I think it's like 4.4 to 1. So it does fail, um, but it's very close. Um, so that's one thing to note. And we've got, you can see several places on the page where we have a very pale yellow used for little text, for headings, etc. And if we come over here to this site with the invert colors option, this looks a little bit better. We could double check it. That may pass now, this particular one. But if we look at where we had the pale yellow text, well, now we just have pale yellow, or now we have like a dark blue on a black background, which doesn't look like that is sufficient contrast. So it didn't really fix our contrast issues. So let's look at our next option, which is dark contrast, which actually changes like the background and foreground colors on the website. So it does pass color contrast now for sure. This is a very high contrast. This probably passes AAA contrast. But it obviously significantly changed the design of the website. So we don't have our brand colors anymore. We didn't get any control over how this got applied. And then let's look at I see that there's a third option here. So how these work is if there's more than one option, you just keep clicking the button and it kind of cycles through all the options. And we have a light contrast, which is the opposite basically of what we just looked at, where it's just going to make anywhere there's text, it's going to make the background white and the text black. So that also solves the problem. It does fix the contrast problem throughout the site. But again, it also makes a pretty significant change to the design. So let's turn that. We click it again. It turns off. Let's try the smart contrast and we'll see what happens there. So in smart contrast, it's kind of interesting. And I think that maybe this might be what I would expect the widget to do out of the box, but it only does it on demand, which is you could see that this book now button, for example, right? I told you those buttons just barely don't pass contrast. It did make it a shade darker. It added a background behind our 25% off. And then on the rest of the page, it actually just adjusted the colors. So it made our yellow a much darker yellow in different places. Like I said, it made the buttons a darker blue, and tried as much as it could to keep the general design of the website, but did darken or lighten, I guess, colors that needed to be adjusted to meet color contrast. So if I turn that back off, though, the site just looks the same as it always did. So for this one, I'm going to say this fixed only with preferences. So yes, this issue could be fixed with the widget, but only if the user actually opens up the widget and changes settings in there. So it's not something that the overlay widget just fixed on its own. All right. The next thing that we have is we have a modal, and hitting the escape key doesn't close the modal, which is a problem, right? That's a violation of 2.1.1. Our modal doesn't behave as expected with a keyboard. So let me go ahead and open that modal. It looks like this. And if I hit the escape key on my keyboard, nothing happens. So this is the default version of the site. So we have a broken keyboard interaction. So let's go ahead and open the version of the page that has the overlay installed, and we'll open up that modal, and I'll hit the escape key, and it didn't fix that problem, right? So there's a problem that wasn't touched. It wasn't changed in any way by having the widget installed. So that accessibility barrier is still there. So we will say this one is not fixed. All right, our next issue is we have a carousel on the home page, and the issue is that it's got 3 slides in it. And again, this is another keyboard problem. I can tab and focus the slides of the carousel that aren't visible right now, which is very confusing for keyboard users and should not happen. So let me demo that a little bit. So this is the default version of the site, and this is my carousel right here, the featured destinations. And so I clicked and I'm just tabbing, and you can see the focus indicator is not very bright, but you could kind of tell that that blue button gets focus when I tab to it. And you can also see that, like right now, I have one focus and it's not visible. And now that slide is visible, and I can see that that focus is there on that tab. So if you look at the very lower left corner of the browser, you can kind of tell when different things have focus. And now we're out past the slides to the left and right buttons for the carousel. But before that, I can tab through to all three of those slides, even when they're not visible. So that's an issue. And of course, carousels are very tricky to make accessible because we don't have a semantic HTML element for them, and we don't even have an ARIA role for that either. So you have to be very careful and creative if you want to implement a carousel and have it be accessible. So this is the version of the page with the widget. So I'm gonna click here on featured destinations to put my mouse there, or my cursor there rather, and I can see that focus was on that Maxwell link, and it stayed there even though that's not visible right now. So it did not fix the fact that I can tab to carousel slides that are not visible on the screen. So let's go ahead and mark that as not fixed. It was not able to fix that accessibility issue. All right, next up, you probably noticed the carousel auto plays and there's no way to pause it. So this is the default version of the site. So I have no way of actually pausing this if I wanted to take an extra minute to read the text on the slide or look at the picture. I have no way to control this carousel at all. And if we take a look at the version of the page that has the overlay, we do actually find in the overlay there is a setting for pause animation. So let's go ahead and enable that and we'll see what happens. So for this particular case, that actually didn't pause the carousel. It's still just going. And I have a theory on what's happening here, because if I go back to UserWay's website, where they're demoing their own widget, and actually I think I have it in, yes, I have pause animations on already. So if I turn that back off, we can see that they have a carousel, I guess, of sorts for their social proof section. And then they also have a carousel for their integrations. And there's no visible way to pause either of those. But if I go into the widget and say pause animations, it immediately pauses this one and it immediately pauses this one as well. But we saw on my site, it didn't actually pause. And my theory is that my slides are not actually changing with an animation, which means like I don't have a slide kind of, visibly moving across the screen in an animated manner or fading in or fading out. They just switch between the slides with no transition. I guess like there's not an animated transition. And I think because there's not an animated transition there, I think I think the animation stop setting is set to just look for that kind of transition and not necessarily content that's just changing. So it didn't stop my carousel. And so I'm going to say that this did not fix this problem. And I even have a theory on why. All right. Next up, we have a non-functional skip link. And again, this was added on purpose to this website. So let me go back. I'm going to just kind of reset both of these websites. I'm just going to scroll to the top and refresh on both of them, just so that we don't have any crazy things going on. And then let me go ahead and tab. And So the skip to main content link on this website is broken in multiple ways. So number one, it has focus right now and it's not visible. So that's one problem. And if you are able to see the teeny tiny little text in the lower left-hand corner of the browser window that tells me that a link has focus right now, you can see that the link is actually set to go to hashtag non-existent main because it is meant to be a broken skip to main content link, right? And because that doesn't exist on the website, when I hit enter, nothing happens, right? So there is a skip to main content link. It doesn't become visible when it receives focus, so that's one problem. And it also doesn't take me anywhere. So let's take a look at the version of the site that has an overlay and see if they were able to fix that problem. And it looks like I've got a setting turned on. Oh, I have the animations pause. All right. I think there's a reset all accessibility settings. So that's picked now. Okay, let me refresh this page again and let me hit tab and see what happens. So we do get a skip to main content link that's visible. Very nicely designed, actually. And if I hit the enter key, I get skipped down to the top destinations of the site. But here's what's interesting. So visually, I jumped down 2 or 3 sections. We'll scroll back up in a second and see exactly what we jumped past. To this top destinations section. But if I hit the tab key on my keyboard again, I'm back up at the top of the screen. So like it visually jumped me down there, but didn't move focus down there. So it's a little bit weird. And let me scroll back up to the top and refresh this page again, and we'll take a look at that skip to main content link again. So it doesn't, you can see that there's no URL being highlighted at the lower left of the browser window. So that tells me this isn't a link. It doesn't have an href, right? So it's probably a button. We can inspect it, but it's probably a button with some JavaScript. But I don't know how exactly they're deciding what the main content is, because it does seem on the different pages of the site, it seems to kind of jump you down to a random part of the site. So it does dismiss with the escape key though, so that's good. So you'll see that what we jumped past was we skipped past the hero section, we skipped past make a reservation, we skipped past about us, we skipped past the carousel, and it took us all the way down here to top destinations. And I don't know how it decides like what it thinks skipping to main content looks like. But then also I wanted to point out that it added other links up here as well. So if I hit tab again, now it gave me a toggle to enable accessibility for low vision, which is just going to toggle all the colors of the website to like a high contrast mode. We can actually give it a try. It takes a second, but then it kicks in. And now we have a super high contrast mode. And I can turn that back off the same way. So that seems like relatively okay. And then after skip to main content, after enabling or disabling accessibility for low vision, if I hit tab again, now I can open the accessibility menu, which is going to open the widget itself and open it up to all the preference pane. And it does close when I hit escape. And it did return focus back over to that button. So that part of it does function correctly. I did want to shift tab back to the skip to main content. And I do just want to inspect this and see if we can figure out what's happening. Oh, okay. I was like, oh no, it's not even a button, it's a span. But no, that's not true. It's a button. There is a button here. With lots of spans inside of it, basically. And I think those are harmless accessibility wise. They're just probably used to create that layout, right? It's got like a multi-column layout. So they're not causing any kind of issues having those spans in there. And we do have real text in there, skip to main content. But again, like, so there just must be JavaScript that's added to the page, but I don't know how it's deciding what to skip to. if you want to go try it yourself, it's on the different pages of the site. It seems to just skip to a random bit of content, and I don't know how it's kind of figuring out what main means on different sites. So, and I just wanted to show one more important thing. If I tab through this again, okay, so I get to the open the accessibility menu. I hit tab one more time, and it's not obvious, but the little toggle in the lower right-hand corner with the universal access icon, it has focus right now. It does not have a very obvious focus style, right? Focus indicator, but that is what has focus right now. And if I hit tab one more time, I am still able to tap to my broken skip to main content link. So it's still there. So it didn't fix my link. It just added like 4, not even links, I guess buttons before my skip to main content link. So this one's a little bit complicated. I wouldn't say it fixed anything. It did some interesting things, added its own nav. It didn't make my skip link work. Its skip to main content link doesn't, it takes you to more content on the page, but it doesn't take you where you would expect. I don't think any of the pages I tested it took me to where I expected. So I'm a little torn on this one between saying partially fixed or just saying straight up not fixed. Like, I don't know, does that make it worse or better that it added all that extra stuff? Maybe I'll just be generous. I'll say partially fixed. And I would definitely, like, if I were doing an audit or something, I would record a lot of notes about what was going on there and what was happening and what I was seeing. All right, and then let's skip now to this one, which is we're missing a visible focus indicator on one of the links in the footer. So again, we'll go back to the default version of the site. I'll scroll all the way down to the footer and click just to put my focus down here. And oh, well, that didn't work, did it? All right, let's try again. There we go. All right, if I tab through here, it is the about link that's in the navigation that's on the right-hand side of the footer. You can see that the other links in the footer all have a visible focus indicator when they receive focus, as I'm kind of tabbing and shift tabbing back and forth through that nav, but the about link does not. It does have a subtle color change, but that is not a sufficient focus indicator. So let's look over here at the version of the site that has an overlay, and let's see if it was able to fix that problem or not. Okay, so now we're on home, we're on about. So I do have a visible focus indicator. You can see that it looks different than the one that I had on the default page. So it did add like a styled focus indicator. I don't know that that's a sufficient contrast against the background. It seems awfully close. We could double check it just to be sure. So it did add a visible focus indicator. So in that sense, we could say that it's fixed. But can we say that it actually passes? That's a good question. So let's go over here, hover, not hover, focus. Oh, how do we trigger that? Is it focus within here? Okay. Focus within here? Nope. Okay. Focus visible. Let's see. Focus visible. Nope. Oh, there. Well, maybe. Well, this is very weird. I can't seem to actually trigger that to happen. I don't know how they're doing it, which makes me think it's not CSS, but JavaScript that they're adding on focus, because that's my default. Yeah, I can't get just that blue outline that they had. I can't get that. All right, well, let's see. Let's fire up color. Oops, where am I? Color contrast checker. All right. Let's get this fired up over here. And hopefully I can get this to work. Foreground color. Nope. As soon as it clicks off of that, it doesn't have focus anymore. Yeah, well, all right. I'll experiment with that and see if I can grab that blue color, but it doesn't look like against the black background that that's sufficient contrast. And I have a feeling it just added, yeah, it seems to have just added that same blue outline kind of everywhere. But again, I can't really trigger it in the browser tools, so I'm not sure. They must be adding it with JavaScript. So that one, like they added a focus indicator, but it doesn't seem to adapt to any specific colors or background colors, because we also see like the default browser color focus indicator has problems on this site. That's not a good example. Because it is blue and it is very hard to see like up against these blue buttons. And they added their own, but it's also blue. So it's also kind of tough to see up against these blue buttons. So that would actually kind of fail that being sufficient contrast. And then I'm pretty sure on this footer link, that blue doesn't look like enough. So like it helped, but it didn't actually get it to where it was passing. So I think I'm going to say partially fixed on that one. And then we have some small touch targets. So also in the footer, these are too small. They're too small to pass. They should be at least 24 by 24, and they're smaller than that, and they don't have sufficient space between them. So for users who have fine motor control challenges, those would be very difficult to tap the right one without accidentally hitting one that's next to it. Or also just if you're trying to go quickly, right? Or you can imagine if we're on a mobile device, right? My finger is bigger than those icons. So I'd have a hard time tapping the next one, even without a fine motor challenge. So let's take a look at the version with the overlay. And it didn't do anything to fix them, right? So it didn't make sure that they were bigger. They're still the exact same size. And we can just double check and make sure it didn't secretly add some kind of padding or anything around them. So let's go here. Yeah, so my touch target is 20 by 20. And you can see my CSS class there, right? Because I purposely added this accessibility issue here. So 20 by 20, it's too small, doesn't pass. It didn't secretly add any extra padding or anything like that to help us out and make that touch target any bigger. So that's another accessibility issue that didn't get fixed automatically. Now, this one gets a little bit tricky because if I go in here and I say something like bigger text, those get bigger. But also just in the version without the overlay, right? I can command, I'm on a Mac, so it's command plus. I can make them bigger, right? Or if I were on a phone, I could pinch, right? Like I could pinch zoom and make them bigger that way as well. So I don't know that I would necessarily consider the fact that there is a setting somewhere in here that addresses that problem. I don't think I actually consider that fixed, because we can fix that problem in the browser without the overlay. So I'm going to call this one as not fixed. And let's go to the next one, which we have some form fields that have placeholders only and no labels. So that's in our booking form. And let's go ahead and take a look at that on the site that is broken. So it's this form here. And we have, if I open this up to inspect those form fields, and we look at this first one for the destination, and let me switch over to the accessibility panel. So we can see I've got an input. It's got a name ID and a placeholder. It's got no label. There's no visible label. And there's no accessible name, right? So if we look in the accessibility panel, labeled by, not specified, ARIA label, not specified, no label, no title. All there is a placeholder, like everything else just is not specified. So let's jump over to the version with the overlay and take a look. Was it able to fix this problem? So let's scroll back up to that form and inspect. And here we have, so here's where my original ended. It had a type, name, ID, and placeholder. And we see there's some extra attributes added by the overlay. A data attribute, maybe FX means fix, I don't know. And it did add an ARIA label of destination. So it copied the placeholder basically into an ARIA label. And if we look in the accessibility panel, we can now see that the name of that field is destination, and we see that it's specified with the ARIA label. Whereas over here, we just had the placeholder. So it did fix that in one way. I'm going to consider this one partially fixed. And the reason it's partially fixed is because it fixed one problem in that we were missing an accessible name for this form field and we're relying on just the placeholder. But what it didn't fix is that we have another success criteria that says that the label has to be always visible. And it's not, which is the problem with placeholders, is that as soon as I start typing, the placeholder disappears and now I can't see what it was. So if I'm using a screen reader or a refreshable braille display or other types of assistive technology, I might be able to still get the name of that field now as the destination because it's the ARIA label. But visually, if I'm not relying on assistive technology, I have no idea now that I've typed a couple letters into that field. I have no idea what the name of that field is, right? And if I get interrupted and leave and come back, I don't know what I was typing there. Like, I don't know what that field is even for. There's a little like map icon here, but that's not sufficient to give me an idea of what I should be typing in there. So I'm going to say this one is partially fixed because it did add the accessible name, but it didn't make sure that we had an always visible label. All right, the next challenge that we have, carousel changes are not announced. So like I said, we've got a whole bunch of issues with the carousel, whole bunch of challenges. And another one is that the changes are not announced, right? So this is not, let me close this panel down here. So this is not hooked up with any kind of, oops, I went past it, sorry. There we go. There's the carousel. So it's not hooked up to any kind of ARIA live regions or announcements or anything like that. So as those slides change, whether I change them purposely myself or whether they just automatically change, nothing is announced to a screen reader users. Let me fire up. I have VoiceOver. I'm on my Mac today. So let me just fire that up real quick and we'll take a listen.
VoiceOver on Chrome. Discover Venus, a romantic getaway. Part of Group Overlays Google Chrome. Natalie, Aardvark.
All right. So if you're going to play with screen readers, the very first thing that you need to know is how to make it stop talking. And with VoiceOver, that is hitting the control key at the bottom left of your keyboard. So anytime you want it to stop, that is the button that you can hit. So let me get down to that carousel. Give me 1 second.
Banner. You are heading level 1. Navigation. List 5 items. You are currently headings menu. On item 2, 2, 2, 2, 3, Beta Regio 2, heading level 2, top destinations. You are currently on a headings menu 2, top 3, 2, heading level 2, featured destinations. You are
okay. So here we are. It's the featured destinations, and we see that the carousel's changing. Nothing's getting announced, right? Nothing's happening. And let me even try to go and I'll navigate to the forward and back buttons and I'll try activating those and we'll see if it tells us anything about what's happening as a result of activating those buttons.
Headings menu. Landmark form controls menu. Next. Previous button. Previous button. You are currently on a button. To click this button, press Control, Option, Space.
So I don't know if the actual little button click sound is coming through in the audio, right? But I'm hearing it. I know that I'm clicking the button, and I can visually see that when I click the button, the carousel changes, but there's nothing announced to the screen reader at all. So let me turn the screen reader. Well, let me just jump over. Let's jump over to the version that has the overlay installed and see if it was able to fix that problem. So give me 1 second. Give me 1 second to navigate over there and get down to the feature destinations carousel.
Discover Venus, a romantic getaway, web content. Discover Venus, heading level 2, no items in, form controls menu, Discover Venus, Discover tab search, group overlay, you just discover toolbar bookmark, Discover Venus, a romantic form controls menu. On item skip to main content, enable check the previous, but link, stand heading max explore heading level 2, explore or handpicked Venus adventures. You are currently on a selected.
All right, so I'm down here to the carousel. Sorry, the name escaped my mind. And we can hear it's changing. There's nothing being announced at all. Let's see what happens if we go to the actual like next or previous button and activate it and see if anything gets announced then.
Maxwell Monte heading level stat link lock heading export link preview next button. You are currently on a button. To click this button, press Control Option Space.
Yeah, so I'm able to press the button. I'm able to advance the slide in the screen or advance the slide in the carousel, but nothing is announced. This carousel is really terribly put together.
Voiceover off.
Like I said earlier, there's no semantic HTML element for a carousel, and there's no ARIA role for it either. So you have a definite challenge ahead of you when you try to make a carousel accessible. So this one is not fixed. And let's go ahead and dive into our next one, which is we have empty alt text on an informative gallery image. Okay, great. We're done with the home page. So now we're going to move on to the destination detail page. So let me go navigate over to that page on both sites, which there's only one. No matter which destination you pick, you're going to land on the Maxwell one here. And I can tell you right now that it is the third slide in the little image changer here that has an alt attribute that is just empty. So if we inspect this, we can see our image has an empty alt attribute. The other 3 images in the image changer, they all have alt text because they are not decorative images. They're sharing information about this location. And this one, it has an alt attribute, but it's empty, which, if you're not familiar, that is how you would signal to assistive technology that this is a decorative image that doesn't have any meaning, which is incorrect. And so let's take a look at the third image here. And the images get loaded in randomly, which is why it looks like a different image than what it was on the previous page, but it's just the third image in the carousel. So if we take a look, it still has an empty alt attribute. So the overlay widget wasn't able to detect that this image was incorrectly marked as decorative and didn't add an alt attribute to it. Now there's further down on our list of issues is an image that's missing its alt attribute altogether. So we'll test that case as well. But for this case, it did not fix this problem that we had an image marked as decorative that wasn't. So not fixed. All right. So we have a light box on this page that is not trapping focus inside the modal. So let's go ahead and open that up. Let me close up I forget exactly where do I open it. Details. Is it this one? Oh, it's this one. Okay, so we have this open, and it did move focus into it, but you can see that I'm able to tab through the page behind it, which you should not be able to do with a modal open. So let's go back over here to the page, the version of the page that has the overlay installed, and see if they were able to fix that. And they were not. I am still able to get out of that modal and access the page behind it. So we will mark that issue as not fixed. All right, the next step is our lightbox dialog is missing an accessible name. So let's see if it was able to fix that one. So let's take a look here, and we'll inspect it this time. Let's inspect the modal. Let's see what we got here. Modal lightbox role dialog. Okay, so this is our role dialog, and ARIA modal true. You can see the name is empty. I don't have any kind of accessible name on this modal. So let's go ahead and take a look at it over here and see if that was fixed. So go up to modal role dialog. Here it is. And my name is still empty. So it didn't recognize this to add a kind of ARIA label or labeled by or anything to it. So the name is still empty. So this issue we will mark as not fixed. All right, next up, the close button is missing an ARIA label, so it doesn't have an accessible name. So let's take a look. We're over here. Let's inspect it. So our button, it just contains this icon. It has no, you can see my comment here, intentional accessibility issue. No accessible name on this button. So let's take a look. Was it able to fix that issue? All right, button. It added it did add a name. It added an ARIA label of times. It's not accurate. It was a good try. I think it just tried to use whatever was in there. You know, this is just a font awesome icon that is called times. The name of the icon is times. But that is, of course, not the purpose of our button. And this is the challenge that you run into when you try to like programmatically add accessible names to things, is that it's very difficult to kind of try to determine what that accessible name should be. So I'm going to say that that was not fixed because times doesn't help us out there. All right. The lightbox counter is not in a live region. So we have, let's see, we do have this little counter here, and that doesn't get announced to screen readers when we change. Like again, we've got a little carousel embedded here. We're not announcing that. So let me open up the screen reader real quick, and I'll give this a try so we can hear that it's not updating as that text updates. We're not hearing any kind of update. The carousel's not correctly programmed, right? It doesn't announce anything. And then we'll check and see if that's fixed in the version with the overlay.
Voiceover on Chrome. Maxwell Montes. Discover V.
So you can see that the button is functional visually. I can click the button, the image changes, the counter updates. This is 1 of 4, 2 of 4, 3 of 4, etc. But nothing at all is getting announced to the screen reader. So let me jump over to the version of this site that has the overlay installed, and we'll see if it was able to fix that.
Group 3 of 4. Talk. Skip to quick accessibility options. Region. Enable open the accessibility form controls menu. View larger image. View image 1. View read more. Collapsed button. 24 previous. Next button. Next button.
Okay.
You are currently on a.
All right. So I made my way to the next button. Let's go ahead and see what happens when I activate it.
Next button. Next button.
Yeah, so same result. we're able to activate the button, but
Voiceover off.
it didn't actually fix the issue that we had there. So let's go ahead and mark that as not fixed. All right, next. All right, that's everything on the destination detail page, and I am running out of time. I still have a few more left. I'm going to stay and just try to get through the rest of these in the next 5 to 10 minutes, just so that we have the record complete. If you have to go, that's fine. It's recorded. You can come back to wherever you're watching it. If you're on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, you can come back later and catch the rest of it if you're not able to stay right now. I'm going to go ahead and finish up just these last 6 tests it looks like I've got. And it looks like they're mostly on the booking page. So let me jump over there on both sites. Let's say book now. All right. Oh, and I forgot I was in the middle of booking on both of these. Okay. Let's go to previous. We go back to the first page. Okay, so we're on the first page of each one of them. And my challenge first is that I have a color only error indicator on the primary destination field and in step 1 and the email field in step 2. So if I have the primary destination empty on step 1 and I say next, the first thing they can see is nothing happened here. And if I scroll back up, there's no indication of an error here at all. And if I select a destination there and click next, and then I leave the email field empty, which was my other field, next, and nothing, right? So we have no kind of error message communicated at all. So let's go ahead and try this over here. So we'll set this to empty. And this is with our overlay. Next, nothing, no visible error message here at all. So it didn't fix that problem. And then let's take out this email address and next, and there's nothing. So it was not able to fix that problem. So we'll say not fixed. All right. And then on the last page of booking where we have the review step, we have some vague link text, which that'll make more sense in a second when you see the screen. So did I put that email address back? Nope. Okay. Let's put that back. And we'll go through to the last screen. And this is what it means, because we just have this whole set of links that just say edit. And we can't tell those apart. So let me show why that's a problem. Let me open up the screen reader again.
Voiceover on Chrome. Book your trip. Group you book your toolbar book your trip. Discover the form controls landmarks Windows links menu. On item. Okay, so this is the way that a lot of screen reader users navigate around a page, is that they'll just pull this list of links. And you can see that we have down the list a little bit. Edit. We can't tell those 3 links apart. Like, what are we editing? Edit. So that's what the problem is, and that's why it's problems. Let's go over to the version that has the overlay and see if they were able to fix this kind of like repeated ambiguous links. I'm going to close the screen reader user here for a second. No items in. Links menu. Oops. Book your trip. Discover Venus. Voiceover off. All right. And let's go through to the last page of the form. And let's inspect these and see what we've got. It doesn't look like it added any kind of extra context or anything to those links that would help me tell them apart. Voiceover off. Whoops. Voiceover on Chrome. Book your trip. View source. Line Oops, I do that all the time. Edit. There we go. Menu. Edit. You link. Yeah. Edit. Voiceover off. So they just say edit. They don't actually help
So not fixed. We have errors not associated with the inputs on the validations. Let's go back one field. This one doesn't have validation. Let's go back here. And if we take out the name and try to go next, we do get an error message in this case, but it is not associated with the form field as it should be. So if we look here, it's just a div with a class, and it's not programmatically associated with the form field, which means that I'm not going to hear it when this form field gets focused in a screen reader. And I'm not going to have any idea that there's an error message there for me to take a look at. So let me go back over to the version with the overlay and see if it was able to fix that problem. All right, so I got to go back to screens, and we'll take out the name and say next. And let's inspect that now. All right, error message. It didn't make any changes here, so it didn't fix that problem either. So not fixed. All right, 3 more tests to go. Labels are not associated with the form field, so our primary destination select. So we'll go back to page 1 again. Wait, yeah, I'm on page 2. Okay, page 1. I guess I should have put these in order by step. So it looks like there's a label for this form field, but it's not actually programmatically associated with it. So if we inspect that, you can see there's a label, but it doesn't have a for attribute. And here's my select that's sitting here, and it has a name of destination. And if I look at the computed properties, there's an empty name field. So it's not able to, it doesn't have any kind of accessible name. So let's go over here. Let me go back to page 1. Oh, am I already there? Oh yeah, here we go. Let's see if it was able to fix that here. So let me open this back up again. I suspect it may be able to get this one. So it wasn't able to actually fix the label, right? It didn't add a for attribute to the label, but it did add an ARIA label that says select your main destination. So it was able to detect maybe a nearby label that wasn't correctly associated. And it was able to give it an accessible name, and it is an always visible label. So I think we have to consider that one fixed. It's not the ideal fix. It wouldn't be I wouldn't have, if I were manually fixing it, that's not how I would have fixed it. But it is fixed. All right. The next one is we're missing for our dietary and add-on groups, we're missing a field set in legend. Let's see if it was able to fix that. So that's page 3. Oh, actually, dietary requirements right here on page 2. So ideally, this should be marked up as a field set with a legend, and we have just a div with a class of form group. We could do this with an ARIA role instead of a field set, but this div doesn't have the correct role. Dietary requirements is a label when it should be a field set, right? So this div should be a field set. This label should be a legend. And then we should have our checkboxes inside of there. So let's go take a look over here and see if it was able to detect and fix that problem. All right, here we go. And no, it's the exact same markup. So it was not able to fix the missing form for field set, which means that people using assistive technology are not going to understand the question being asked and not know what those options are. Sometimes you can figure it out from what the options are, but not always. All right, last test that we're going to take a look at. We're going to go over to the About page, and this is our other alt test where we looked at what it did before with an image that had an alt that was empty and it did nothing, and it was incorrect. That was incorrect and should be fixed. Here we have an alt attribute that's missing entirely. So let's go over to the About page and see what it does with that. So go to About on both sites, and we have, it is Elena. So let's go ahead and inspect this image. And you can see it's just IMG SRC. There's no alt, there's no nothing. If I look in this accessibility panel, there's no accessible name for this image at all. If I compare that to the next image, by comparison, this one does have the person's name. Now there's a whole can of worms around what's appropriate alt text for headshots. We won't get into it here. That would be a completely separate live stream. But this site, they're just using the names as the alt text for those. So let's go ahead and take a look at Elena Vasquez. And we'll see. Oh, and it did add some attributes here, including an alt with the name. So it matches the others. Now, whether or not that's appropriate alt text for a headshot, that's a question for another day. But I'm going to go ahead and we'll call that one fixed. All right. So the end result here, we did 22 tests. We actually only did 20. We still have 2 that are not tested. There were 2 that were hard to actually show that I removed from they're just hidden. You can see the hidden rows here. So I'll share this if you're curious to try those out. So out of the remaining 20, 2 were fixed, 3 were partially fixed, and 14 were not fixed. So I would say that generally, if this is the solution that you're relying on for accessibility, you should probably be aware that there's still a lot to do. You still have a lot of work to do. And I just wanted to briefly touch on a couple of things because I know this has become a problem, which is last year. So this was April of 2025. Accessibility was fined by the FTC here in the US $1 million for claiming that their access widget can make any website compliant with WCAG. So that's something that you should be aware of. And then also, I have the May 2026 numbers from UsableNet for lawsuits filed in the US. So for May of 2026, we had 441 ADA website accessibility lawsuits filed. And of those, 121 of them were using a third-party accessibility overlay. So indication seems to be from this, and that result is consistent with previous months and with last year's data as well. So the indication seems to be that the accessibility overlay is not necessarily protecting you from legal action either, which makes sense because people are bringing legal action against your website because it's not accessible. And the results of our test here are that, yes, if you started with an inaccessible website and all you did was install an overlay widget, it likely did not make your website accessible. So we saw how this all worked out today with this particular overlay widget. We could test some others, but I think we would get generally pretty similar results. I think that would actually be an interesting thing to do is to use the same kind of score sheet to test some others as well. But that is all I have for you today. Thank you if you stuck with me for going over time. This is probably the longest we've ever gone over. I was hoping I could fit 20 tests in, but they took a little more time than I thought. So thank you for sticking with me, or thank you for catching up on the recording later if you had to come back and watch later. Like I said earlier, my name is Natalie. I am founder of Aardvark, and we're an accessibility testing tool. I do these live streams every other Wednesday afternoon, covering all different types of accessibility topics. And if you are interested, you can join every other Wednesday, same time as today. And there are recordings of all the past live streams up. Last time we did how to code accessible tabs. We have also done topics on coding, testing, looking at WCAG. So all different levels, like every week is something different. So sometimes it's for developers, sometimes it's for website owners, sometimes it's for designers. So could join in and see what the topics are. And thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have a wonderful week. I hope you are having a wonderful summer. And hopefully I'll see you 2 weeks from today. Thank you.